Welcome back, everyone, to the weigh-in of the century. I am your host, Teching101, and today we're going to be answering a question that people have been asking since before there were people, since the dawn of time, since the beginning of time itself. How heavy is Barry D. Brick? We have the scale here. We have the foam pad, which I have zeroed out. So now we're going to see just how much Barry weighs. Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. Oh, man. Oh, man. Can the scale maintain? Wait, it says infinity. That can't be right. All right, here we go. Barry's weight in kilograms is 2.610. 2.610 kilograms. There we go. Let's also find out what this is in other units. He weighs 5 pounds, 12 ounces, and 2,610 grams, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for Barry D. Brick. And now he's going up against his opponent, Carl the Cinderblock, bring him on in. No, okay. So there we go. Now, obviously, Barry has had to. It's like the TARDIS. You got to bring down the weight of the TARDIS, or it'll like crack the core of the planet whenever it lands on. So I don't know, but the weight that Barry has when he's on my desk is about 2.6 kilograms. There we go. All right, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about a fan favorite devil fruit for sure. I know a lot of people were expecting this one. I don't think I've gotten a single recommendation for this. I don't think a single person was like, I can't wait until Machvise's devil fruit. We're going to be talking about the Ton fruit, wielded by Machvise of the Doflamingo family. He uses it during Dressrosa. He is ultimately defeated by Hyrule and thrown an Impel Down, I would assume. So, yes, the fruit is the upgraded form of the Kilo no Mi, wielded by Miss Valentine. Also, her real name is Makita. And it allows Machvise to gain even heftier quantities, even more girth, ladies and gentlemen, because I know what we were all thinking, okay? Would you rather be crushed by a sexy lady in a lemon dress like Usopp was during Little Garden? Lucky bastard. Would you rather have that happen to you by Makita, or would you prefer big, giant, sweaty motorcycle wrestler dude? Oh yeah, brother. I want to get crushed by Machvise. Be put in the vice. All right. Okay. So, there really isn't much to say, but we're gonna give it a go. All right. So with Miss Valentine's Kilo no Mi, she was able to change her body weight from 1 kilogram to 10,000 kilograms. All right, that was the limit of what she could do, which I believe 10,000 kilograms is just 10 metric tons. See, the thing here that was a little confusing to me, and I'm going to try to make this as less confusing as possible, but I'm probably going to mess it up, is that, yeah, in the United States, we use imperial. So a ton in the imperial measurement is not the same as it is in the rest of the world. An imperial ton is 2,000 pounds, and a metric ton is different. So I had to do some conversions here, okay? But yes, she can go from 1 kilogram, which is the weight of like a liter of water, or maybe like a really heavy book. A kilogram is about 2.2 pounds for my American listeners and viewers, okay? So that's her lowest, and then the highest is 10,000 kilograms, 10 metric tons. This is equivalent to the weight of like a school bus, or maybe like a delivery truck, like a FedEx truck or something like that, could get to that weight. So that gives you a general idea of her heft, of how heavy Miss Valentine was when she was like crushing Usopp, or when she would fly up into the sky. Now, here's the interesting thing about Miss Valentine and Machvise as well. They seem to have the ability to also kind of zero out their weight a little bit, because that's the reason Miss Valentine was carrying around that umbrella. She would lower her weight to the point where a breeze would pick her up with her umbrella, and she'd be floating around in the sky, and then she could all of a sudden turn her weight all the way up to like 1,000 kilograms and just go flying down to crush somebody. That was kind of her idea, to gain an increase of weight in the air and then like terminal velocity crush you and kind of shit like that, right? Now, she also doesn't seem to have any injuries from this, so So, she's up in the air and then all of a sudden turns into 5,000 kilograms and just launches and, makes a crater in the ground, but she gets out of it perfectly fine. So, even if you reduced your weight down to 1 kilogram, which is, like I said, about the weight of like a liter of water, I don't know if like a liter of water would be picked up by a gentle breeze and you'd be flying around in the air. So I think Oda was having some liberties with that, or maybe you could literally zero out your weight. Now, we also see Machvise doing the same shit. We see him getting a lot of airtime during Dressrosa. I mean, not a lot of airtime in the manga or the anime. He's actually one of the most least developed of the Doflamingo family. But he gets airtime in that he can kind of like jump up in the air and we see him kind of floating around a little bit before he increases his weight and crashes down to somebody, right? So I just realized this while I was editing. A better way of saying this would not be zeroing out your weight, because that could cause problems, right, if you have absolutely zero weight at all. But a better way of looking at it, and I do touch upon this later in the video with increments of weight, is that maybe Miss Valentine can only control her weight in kilograms, but it also counts if she changes her weight to like 0.0001 kilograms, and that still counts. So that makes her, like, she would have to be as light as like a fluff of cotton or something in order to actually get up in the air like she does. And Machvise likewise can do the same thing. It's just that he has to make it like 0.00000001 tons, and then that's how he ends up in his in the air time. There is the best way I could describe it. Now, he has an array of techniques, but this might not be the full scope of all the weight he can turn into, right? So, like, the lightest he ever becomes with a named technique is his 10-ton vice, which 10 tons is the maximum weight we see Miss Valentine do. So his weakest technique that he's used, his basic, his opener, because he's kind of like a wrestler kind of deal. He's got like the leotard, right? Okay, he's got the onesie. Also, for some reason, never explained, he has a tail. Like a flattened kind of like beaver tail that beavers will use to like, pack down the mud for their like dams and everything like that. He's had it since he was a kid, and we do not know why. Maybe he's part mink, I guess. He's like part beaver on his dad's side or something. I don't know, but he has a tail, okay? I don't know. Law was in the crew at some point, but this would have been before Law was even born that Machvise had the tail, so it can't be the same thing as like the chimera creatures on Punk Hazard. Something else altogether, not really important. It's just he has a tail. It's just okay, whatever, it's One Piece. So anyway, yeah, his opening technique is 10-ton vice, which is the maximum of the Kilo no Mi, which I said is about the weight of like a school bus, okay? And so that's the lightest we've seen him become, but he might be able to become lighter than that. And in fact, he kind of has to be, right? It's just that with the ton fruit, you increase, does it have to be in increments of tons, or is he able to go in between? Can he increase his weight by 0.0001 tons? Can he do it that way, or does it have to be 1 ton to 2 tons? There's no in between, right? 10 tons to 20 tons, stuff like that. I'm not really sure, but that is the lightest technique that we've seen from Machvise, all right? Then we upgrade to the 1,000-ton vice. Then we upgrade to his ultimate technique, the 10,000-ton vice of hell. Okay, I mean, like I said, there's not much to say about those individual techniques. One is 10 tons, one is 1,000 tons, and one is 10,000 tons. If you know how weight works, then there you go. You know the difference. But still, 10,000-ton vice of hell, and it was mentioned to be like, this is my strongest technique. Whoa! And he goes charging down when he's fighting Hiruden. So just how damn heavy is 10,000 metric tons? Well, that's about equivalent to, are you ready here for my American listeners? 22,046,226 pounds. That's pretty heavy. Of course, when I go to the gym, I lift about 5 of those, 5 weights. Yeah, 5 weights. Yeah, 5 times that, I guess. 5, I lift weights. Yeah, that's how it is. Right, okay. So, that is about, I was like, okay, so what's even the comparable thing in our world to that? A lot of battleships during like World War II, they kind of settled around that kind of weight, you know, the 22 million pound, 10,000 metric ton range. Also, roughly about the same weight as Golden Gate Bridge. Imagine being crushed by Golden Gate Bridge, all right? But you know what? It's actually not as heavy as I thought it would be. Like, I remember watching the fight between Hiruden and Machvise. And Hiruden is you know, getting crushed by him. It actually is really brutal because in the anime, we actually see, like, all the bruises on Hiruden's body. You know, these big, giant, like, purple bruises on his arm and leg. Because Machvise is, like, relative. I mean, he's a big dude, but relative to Hiruden, who's a giant, Machvise is like this, right? And it's like this little guy is just, like, boom! Like, crushing your bones with his weight. All right? And so he flies up into the air. And to augment this, by the way, he also carries, like, this giant, like, manhole cover, like this giant piece of steel just on his back, and he picks that up and he kind of like crashes into people using the shield, so that's like augments the weight even more. Not really sure if he can increase the weight of objects or just himself. Miss Valentine, I don't think ever was shown to increase the weight of other objects. That would probably be the awakening is when that happens, right? And we never saw him do that. But just to augment like the pain that is felt, he could use like this giant piece of steel to like crash into you, right? So the scene, the final, you know, clash when Hiruden is about to use Gungir and Machvise is using the 10,000 ton hellish vice crashing down. He hits Hiruden right here in the fist as Hiruden's bringing up the punch, and there's this moment of like, yeah, and his teeth, like so much strain, his teeth are like cracking and popping out of his jaw, and he's like, ah, and he finally is able to not only overcome Machvise, but punch him into the next weekend, you know, knocks him out into the sky like Team Rocket, like Machvise is blasting off again. Oh, why did I have a tail? It was completely irrelevant. It was never brought up at all. And then that's how he loses. I remember watching that scene and thinking, that's some bullshit. That is some bullshit. 10,000 metric tons and Hiruden's able to punch that. But you know, now looking into the scale of this being equivalent to a battleship, remember, Jaguar D. Saul lifted up an entire Navy battleship back at O'Hara. Giants lifting up battleships. I'm not talking about ancient giants like oars or whatever. I'm just talking about your regular run-of-the-mill giant like Saul or Hiruden. Even them lifting up a warship is still possible. Now, I'm not a physicist or anything, but I'm going to assume taking 10,000 metric tons, you know, it's different from when it's like a giant building or a battleship or the Golden Gate Bridge. And when you compress that down to the size of a human, like, I don't know if that messes with the quantum field or space-time or something. I kind of feel like something that heavy and dense, especially since the same thing with the Kilo no Mi does not alter their outward appearance at all. You know, so it's not like Miss Valentine has to increase in size to compensate for the increase in weight, or she shrinks when she, you know, reduces herself to like 1 kilogram or anything. Her body stays the exact same height and size and proportions. None of that changes. Same thing with Machvise. Weight is increasing though, so I feel like that would kind of fuck with physics a little bit. Let me know on the full, you know, scope of what that would entail. But even so, compressing 10,000 tons into, like, compared to Hiruden, like a little ping pong ball, basically, he was punching, maybe the size of a softball, because Machvise is a little bigger than your average human, but, like, still, just like, boo! But through the power of sheer grit and Elbathian pride and determination, he was able to punch Machvise away, right? Yeah. All right, so we could keep going. We could talk about an awakening. Yeah, there is actually more to discuss. So if they can't change the weight of anything other than themselves, the awakening of a paramecia would be able to do that. So in the case with Miss Valentine, it would just be... Actually, you know what? This actually has, like, some applications to this. If you're able to... Not just an automatic increase, but, like, if you awakened, and then you can, like, point and choose how much something weighs... even if it's between two values, that's actually really big. You know, if she could like point to a rock and say that that rock is now only 1 kilogram, like a giant boulder, or if she could, oh, dude, imagine if like there was like a bunch of gravel on the ground, right? And Miss Valentine or Machvise went down and picked up like a pebble and they awakened their abilities. And Miss Valentine was like, this pebble now weighs, like she throws it and it's over the opponent and it's like, it now weighs 10,000 kilograms. It would just shred you. It would go right through. It would be like dropping a red hot ball, like iron ball, right through butter. It would just melt right through. It would shoot you right through like a bullet, right? And Machvise, even greater. Machvise like picks up. It's sort of like actually very similar to Diamante's ability. Remember that one ability with the flag fruit where Diamante fired all the confetti into the air, and then the confetti is actually iron balls that were turned into like paper with his flag ability, and then he turned off the ability. They turned back into iron balls and fell on everybody. The same deal. Literally, you could pick anything. You know, it doesn't even have to be like already like having like a lot of weight to it. It could literally just be like cotton fluff. You could pick up like a cotton ball. You know, like, you know, you get those big bags of cotton balls from like the pharmacy or like the department store or whatever. Just get one and then just throw them all in the air and then just be like, yeah, each one of those cotton swabs or those cotton balls now weighs, you know, 10,000 metric tons. Each one weighs the exact same weight as the Golden Gate Bridge. Flying down, they'd be punching holes through the ground or whatever like that. You could, dude, like, yeah, like as an advantage for the battlefield, you could be going around slamming into people, knocking them down, pick up a stick or like a pen and then just like set the pen on their chest. It'd be like Mjolnir, you know, like this incredibly heavy object compressed. So you just like take a pen or something and just like, that pen now weighs 1,000 tons. It'd be like, you know, like, and in One Piece, you know, there's a lot of characters that can resist that power. Actually, Luffy was shown to be immune to it, which is really funny. At one point, Machvise crushes Luffy's hand or his arm, but because he's rubber, he's made of, you know, he's made of rubber and everything, it doesn't really affect him at all. So he's just like, I can't move my hand. Could you please get off my hand? But it doesn't hurt. So, there, you know, he is the hard counter to these abilities, to be honest with you. But yeah. If you're just like maneuvering around the battlefield, being able to manipulate the weight of all the buildings and objects and maybe other people, you know, like if you're fighting in an area and there's like a large enemy, you know how like Luffy was able to knock out all the fishmen, like 50,000 fishmen at you know, the plaza during the final battle there? Wouldn't it be crazy if Machvise like awakened his ton fruit and was like, grovel before Machvise, and everybody just, you know, just feels like intense weight, not extra gravity, not like Fujitora, but actually it would kind of be the same thing, right? Like, they're not a force being pressed on, their physical body weight is going up, and they would be forced to be crushed to the ground, okay? So Machvise, and to a lesser extent Miss Valentine's awakenings, would essentially be the Zushi no Mi wielded by Fujitora, the gravity paramecia. Kind of would be like that, right? Or at least it would yield the same kind of effect. Machvise still would not be able to summon meteors from space because Fujitora is able to send like a gravity wave up into space that grabs a meteor and forcibly brings it down. The awakening of the ton fruit would still be a fixed range like all awakenings are. The range kind of varies depending on, I guess, how skilled you are and everything like that. But it seems to be like the immediate, like I don't know, within 50 meters around you or something like that. Like, you can kind of control the whole battlefield from what we've seen with Doflamingo and Katakuri when they use their awakenings. You know, it wasn't just a limited range right in front of them. But yeah, certainly Machvise wouldn't be able to control things in space or anything beyond the range of that. But anything in the immediate area, he can make everything kind of reduced weight to float and then crush it all on the ground for a big finishing move. It would actually be really interesting. As like, I'm picturing this as like a game mechanic, like playing it like a One Piece fighter or something. That would actually be really cool. Ooh, that should be the new One Piece video game. You know what? Let's just go with that. Honestly, let's do that. Here's my idea for a new One Piece fighting video game, because the fighters are always the best ones in the One Piece video games. It's called One Piece Awakenings. And here's what it is. They go through every single Devil Fruit user and they come up with awakenings for every single one of them. Oda can put in whatever he feels like he has the time to do, right? If Oda has a specific idea for the awakening of the Kilo no Mi, he can give that. Otherwise, maybe Oda just writes down a brief list of, like, this is how Paramecia fruit awakenings work. He gives, like, 5 or 6 rules. This is how Zoans work. Here are the rules. Here's how Logias. Here are the rules. Gives that to the game staff, and then they go, and they're like, okay, based off these rules, we're going to go through every single fucking devil fruit. What's the awakening of Alvida's Sube Sube no Mi? What's the awakening of Mr. Five's Bomb Bomb fruit? What's the awakening of Wapple's Munch Munch fruit? And they just go through all of them. And then you have a big giant fighting game of over 100-something One Piece characters with Devil Fruit powers. And it's like Devil Fruit awakenings. And then they can each go into an awakening. And every single one of them has a unique awakening. Some of the ones like Katakuri and Doflamingo we've already seen. And then others that all of a sudden, you have characters that are relatively weak. Like you could have Foxy go up against a Kainu, but Foxy's awakening might actually be a hard counter to a Kainu's Magma fruit. There you go, video game developers. Make it. One Piece. Devil Fruit Awakenings. Coming for the PlayStation 6. And whatever stupid name they're going to give the Xbox. The next generation Xbox. Xbox One, Xbox 360, Xbox Series X, Xbox... Yeah, the naming schemes of these aren't great. Okay, well, we're getting really off the rails now, but I think we're going to end it here, okay? It started with weighing Barry, and it ended with talking about Xbox naming schemes. All right, well, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching 101 signing out. Heavy.